Now we're going to model the alignment method used in POW instruction. So what we are really doing is classifying NAEP release items to the state standards. To align high-quality NAEP items to the Science K-12 framework, we need to have an in-depth and comprehensive understanding of the cognitive demands items require of students. By going through this process, you will learn the nuances of the college and career-ready standards, as well as the considerations that should be attended to with these items. We're going to explore the items and make judgments about the degree of alignment to the Science K-12 framework, the level of difficulty of the item, the grade level relevancy of the item, the appropriateness for Montana students, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for students to successfully accomplish this task. Specifically, we will achieve this by addressing each of these variables on our variable consensus sheet for each item. For example, what disciplinary core idea is most appropriate for this item? In making our alignment, we also need to focus on the degree of fitness for each item. So for an excellent fit, this means that the concepts and skills addressed by the Science K-12 framework are included in the NAEP item expectations. For a good fit, this means that part of a compound of the NAEP item expectation applies to the Science K-12 framework, and part does not, or minor aspects of the Science K-12 framework are missing. For a weak fit, this means that major aspects of the Science K-12 framework are not addressed. And for no fit, that means that no aspects of the Science K-12 framework are addressed. For our POW purposes, focus your attention on one primary standard. Don't forget the scoring guide. If the item has more than one part, classify the most significant part of the item. In alignment, we want the smallest grain size. However, there may be instances that secondary standards should be considered for full alignment. In these cases, reference the secondary standards, and in the comments section, make sure to denote which is your primary placement and why. Due to our POW scope and time restrictions, we will mainly model and gain agreement on one primary standard. That being said, conversations about why there are multiple parts of an item, or why one item may address several Science K-12 categories should take place. For instance, these categories can take place while clarifying points of disagreement between peers in your consensus rounds. It is important to know what these differences are and why they are prevalent. These fruitful conversations about constructs, assessment designs, and assessment purposes may reveal nuances that everyone should bear in mind while considering their classification decisions. These considerations will help you become more assessment literate and understand why the NAEP construct, by design, was not intended to conform to the expectations of the Science K-12 framework. So now let's practice the actual alignment using NAEP items. So here's a grade 4 item that was given in 2005. The question, in which city did snow fall? To be sensitive to our explanatory time, most examples presented here will cover the major aspects found in the variable sheet. But we may not spend a great deal of time and attention to the item fitness, evidence needed, and comment sections of your variable sheet. However, we want you to vet these aspects in depth. We are only minimizing our conversation here to get through the modeling exercise in a reasonable period of time. For the disciplinary core idea, you might have placed that this is Earth Systems 2. For the DCI component code, you might have placed ESS2.A. So the component code A. Earth materials and systems. 4 major Earth systems interact. Rainfall helps to shape the land and affects the types of living things found in a region. Water, ice, wind, organisms, and gravity. For your evidence, you could have said weather and climate. For the practice, you could have put that this is practice 4. And the evidence that students need to read and understand charts and tables. And for the cross-cutting concept, you could have put the third cross-cutting concept, which is scale, proportion, and quantity. In considering the phenomena, it is critical to recognize what is relevant at different measurements of time and energy, and recognize how changes in scale, proportion, or quantity affect a system's structure or performance, because students need to have time to see the changes. For your depth of knowledge, you could have put this is a level 3, and for your revised Bloom's taxonomy, that this is understand, and that the grade band most appropriate for this item would be 3 through 5. This item was given to 8th graders in 2009, and it is explain what causes an object to change its motion. For your DCI, you could have put that this is a PS2, which is motion and stability, the forces and interactions, and that the component code is PS2A, forces and motion, The effect of unbalanced forces on an object results in a change of motion. Patterns of motion can be used to predict future motion. Some forces act through contact. Some forces act even when the objects are not in contact. The gravitational force of the Earth acting on the object near the Earth's surface pulls the object toward the planet's center. You could have said that for the practice, that none was applicable because it would have been too large of stretch to place it in practice 5, which is using mathematics and computational thinking, because the prompt does not actually require students to make calculations. You could have also said potentially that it was practice 8, obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information, but the multiple choice item type really constrains our ability to place this item within any practice. For the cross-cutting concept, you could have said it was 2, which is cause and effect, the mechanism and explanation, where events have causes, sometimes simple, sometimes multifaceted. A major event of science is investigating and explaining causal relationships and the mechanisms by which they are mediated. Such mechanisms can be then tested across given contexts and used to predict and explain events in new contexts. For the depth of knowledge level, you could have said it was a 2, and that for the revised Bloom's taxonomy, that this was understand, and that the grade band for this that is most appropriate would be 3 through 5. Lastly, this item was given for 12th graders in 2000. So the question, recombinant DNA technology as described in the article is believed to have great promise in treating certain diseases. Give an example of an inherited disease that people might be able to treat by use of this technology, and explain how you think the technology might be used to treat this disease. So here it's a short constructed response. Difficulty was denoted as hard, and only 20% of students who were given this item were able to answer it correctly. For the DCI, you might say that it's LS1, which is from molecules to organisms, structures, and processes, and that the component to DCI is LS1A, structure and function, which is systems of specialized cells within organisms help perform essential functions of life. Any one system in an organism is made up of numerous parts. Feedback mechanisms maintain an organism's internal conditions within certain limits and mediate behaviors. The evidence here would be bioengineering of viruses using structures and processes. For the practice, you could have said that this is practice 6, constructing explanations and designing solutions. For the cross-cutting concept, you could have said this is 2, cause and effect. Mechanism and explanations, that is, events have causes, sometimes simple, sometimes multifaceted. A major activity of science is investigating and explaining causal relationships and the mechanisms by which they are mediated. Some mechanisms can then be tested across given contexts and used to predict and explain events in new contexts. For the depth of knowledge, you could have stated this was a depth of knowledge 3, and that the revised Bloom's taxonomy would have been apply, and the grade band most appropriate for this item would have been high school 9 through 12. Now we're going to look at your POW assignment. So for your POW assignment, work the items as if you were a student. While you're working the items, make notes while you work of the steps you took in order to complete the task. Use the notes in the comment section of your consensus building sheet to articulate the knowledge, skills, and abilities a student would need to successfully answer the question. Place the item where it is best represented under the Science K-12 framework. Elicit any evidence of the standard that helped you place this item in the evidence section of your consensus building sheet.